जय स्वामीनारायण बधाने સહજાનંદ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય, બાપા શ્રીની જય, સદગુરુઓ શ્રીની જય, સ્વામિનારાયણ ભગવાનની જય તથા અનંત અનાદિ મુક્તોની જય. A humble prayer in their lotus feet and our Guru, Anadi Muktraj Param Pujya Narayan Mama and Leela Masi's lotus feet, to augment this assembly with their divinity and grace. I humbly bow to their feet and pray to them to shower their blessings on us now and forever, for the bliss of the divine Murti of Lord Swaminarayan. I also bow to my knowledge Guru or Gnan Guru, Param Pujya Jitu Kaka. I also request forgiveness from them as well as from the divine satsang, to pardon my mistakes and shortcomings and ignorance. We are all the blessed satsangis of Lord Swaminarayan who have utmost faith in the Lord, meditate upon His divine form, and continuously strive to exemplify the principles, teachings, and philosophy of Lord Swaminarayan. We are the torchbearers carrying forward the light of satsang in this generation and onwards. From that perspective, it becomes important that we understand the principles, teachings, and philosophy of Lord Swaminarayan through sharing of knowledge and insights that each one of us has gained through our own study and experience. Now, talking about knowledge, I recently came across a very good explanation on difference between knowledge and information. Information is a set of disconnected dots. Each dot in itself contains some piece of information which is in itself complete but does not paint the big picture. Knowledge is the ability to connect the dots. The dots can be connected in zillions of different ways, but knowledge is the ability to be able to connect them. To give an example, in school, we all have done exercise of connecting the dots to create pictures of animals, flowers, etc., and then fill them up with crayon colors. I'm sure each one of us has done that. And some of us, I'm sure, have also done the rangolis from a 10 by 10 or 25 by 25 or even 100 by 100 dot matrix, and then creating patterns out of it and filling them up with brilliant colors. The dots by themselves do not mean anything, but when we connect them, when we fill them with colors, they show beautiful pictures. Likewise, while every incident from life of Lord Swaminarayan teaches us something, when we connect it together, we learn about the personality of Lord Swaminarayan himself. Every teaching of Lord Swaminarayan shows us the direction, but putting it all together, we get the Swaminarayan philosophy. So, connecting the dots is quite important. Secondly, how do we know and understand someone, be it spiritually or otherwise? If the person is physically present and accessible, then nothing compares to spending real time with the person. If we cannot meet the person ourselves, then we might know them through someone who knows him or her well. If the person is remote, these days we have the facility of teleconference, video conference, etc., which we didn't have in earlier days. In earlier days, it used to be documented conversations or documented life incidents that we had to rely on. So in a nutshell, to know a person, we should be able to personally meet the person or meet someone who has a connection with the person or rely on documented or recorded conversations and life incidents. So to really know Lord Swaminarayan, we can either connect with him through meditation or connect with his mukta or know him through his documented life incidents and teachings. Now, luckily for us, there is a wealth of such documentation available for life incidents, for teachings, and for codes of conduct. Lord Swaminarayan's life incidents are documented in Bhakta Chintamani, Hari Charitra Chintamani, Hari Lilamrut Sukhsagar, etc., and also in so many kirtans. His teachings are available to us through Vachnamritam and codes of conduct through Sikshapatri, Dharmamrit, etc. Apart from these scriptures, and based on these original scriptures, there are several books written about life incidents of Lord Swaminarayan. Now, bringing these two thoughts together about connecting the dots and about knowing a person, we can understand the personality of Supreme Lord Sri Swaminarayan when he advented on this earth by connecting the dots of his life incidents, and we can understand the philosophy of Lord Swaminarayan by connecting the dots of his teachings. We already spent some time earlier this year understanding his philosophy. So let's now spend some time understanding his personality. The next question is, how do we connect the dots? And which dots to connect? how do we tie Lord Swaminarayan's life incidents? And which life incidents do we tie together? Even if we have just two dots, we can connect them in as many different ways as lines and curves and patterns we can draw in between them, which is infinite. There is so much to learn from life of Lord Swaminarayan that an attempt to capture it all seems hubris. So for our purposes, we will build a framework. Actually, we'll build two frameworks. One from the current contemporary thinking, and one from ancient Hindu thought. Now, the perspective of current contemporary thinking is a little away from the satsang conversations that we might all be used to. And I beg pardon from Sriji Maharaj and all the Mukto for taking a slightly different approach. From current contemporary thinking perspective, more than religious books, there is a lot of emphasis in our daily lives on books for self-development, effectiveness, growth, and leadership. Of these books, some have really stood out for me. Again, I'm sharing my perspective, and I'm sure each one of us has developed insights and knowledge of our own. So kindly do not think of this as my hubris towards anything. I'm just sharing my perspective and an approach. So the books that have made an impression on me, the first is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Second is Jonathan Livingston Seagull. By Richard Bach. Third is Don't Sweat the Small Stuff by Richard Carlson. And then there are other books like Strengths-Based Leadership, Who Moved My Cheese, Multipliers. And these are the top of the list books for me. We will use the concepts mentioned in these books to form basis of our contemporary framework. This framework will be just one sentence. Lord Swaminarayan was a highly effective spiritual leader. So let me repeat. Our framework is just one sentence, and that is Lord Swaminarayan was a highly effective spiritual leader. Now, during our conversations, we will first understand the concepts in these books at a high level. Later, we'll map Lord Swaminarayan's life incidents and see that he was effective. See that he was a leader, and see that he was a spiritual leader. We will most probably end up spending about 4 to 6 satsangs for this. From ancient Hindu and religious perspective, Lord Swaminarayan has mentioned in Vadtal Prakran 10th Vachnamritam that Supreme Lord should be understood through 39 characteristics of Godhead that manifests as a king, and 32 characteristics of Godhead that manifests as a saint. In Gadhada Pratham Prakran 62nd Vachnamritam, Sri Abji Bapa Shri has listed the 39 characteristics of God originally listed in Srimad Bhagavat, Canton 1. In Gadhada Pratham Prakran 77th Vachnamritam, Sri Abji Bapa Shri has listed the 32 characteristics of saint, originally listed in Canton 11 of Srimad Bhagavat. During our conversations, we will understand the characteristics and take life incidents from life of Lord Swaminarayan and map them to these characteristics. Now there is some overlap between the two sets of characteristics, the 39 and the 32, and we will merge them together as necessary during our journey. And we'll try to walk through 3 to 6 characteristics during each satsang. One more thing before we begin our journey. Unlike our journey earlier this year, where we walked together once a week, for this journey, we will walk together once a month, or maybe once every 3 to 4 weeks. So let's embark on this journey with blessings of Anant Mukto and humble prayer to all of them and to Lord Swaminarayan to continuously guide us through this journey. So, looking at it from contemporary perspective, we mentioned 3 things: effectiveness, leadership, and spiritualism. We will use the concepts in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to show that Lord Swaminarayan was very effective. We will use the concepts from strengths-based leadership, who moved my cheese and multipliers, to show that Lord Swaminarayan was a great leader. We will use concepts from Jonathan Livingston Seagull to show that Lord Swaminarayan was a spiritual leader. For those who do not know who Stephen Covey was, he was a renowned author and instructor and coached many CEOs and led many leadership classes and workshops at many corporations to build an effective and holistically healthy company culture. In his most renowned book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen has described how effective people are different. So first of all, in the interest of those who have not read the book and are not familiar with it, we will understand these concepts and the habits. We will stay at a very high level since we only want to understand them for our purpose. Our goal is not to understand Stephen Covey's book, but to understand that Lord Swaminarayan was a very effective spiritual leader. For those who are interested, there is a hard copy as well as audio CDs of all these books that I mentioned available. We can find them at very good rates on Amazon. So anyone who wants to indulge in reading these books, they should be readily available. So once we have understood the concepts and habits, we will then understand how Lord Swaminarayan had displayed these effectiveness characteristics and habits 200 plus years ago. The reason I stress on 200 plus years ago is because the times were very different. The world and the perspective of the world has really changed in the last 200 years. But the principles of effectiveness that the modern world talks about, Lord Swaminarayan had already displayed them so many years ago. And we will do this using life incidents from Lord Swaminarayan's life, right? We'll take a few incidents for each of these areas. So, for the rest of our time today, and I'll actually walk through this a little quickly, pick up the pace a little, because as I mentioned, our goal is to just understand it enough to follow the framework. So the book first talks about a few concepts like character ethic versus personality ethic, paradigm shift, principles versus values, and what is a habit. And followed by these concepts are the 7 habits, which are: be proactive, begin with end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, and sharpen the saw. Now let's look a little bit into what these concepts and habits are. Once again, this is for those who are not familiar with the book but want to follow our framework for understanding the personality of Lord Swaminarayan. The concept of character ethic versus personality ethic says that character ethic, which is our inner strength, genuineness, integrity, modesty, love, compassion, empathy, etc., is the portion of the iceberg that is submerged in the water, which is about 7/8 of the entire iceberg. The personality ethic, the tip of the iceberg, which is visible outside the water, has evolved in last 70 to 80 years, and it is about techniques to influence others, to show a positive attitude or to portray a positive attitude, and improve outward appearance. Personality ethic is how to influence others without dealing with our own character. Kavi says the personality ethic is good as far as it is based on character ethic. Personality ethic without character ethic is only a show or portrayal of good qualities. They are not real qualities. It results into conniving, backstabbing, manipulating others, etc. Character ethic focuses on inner growth and real knowledge, whereas personality ethic is about outward looks. Character ethic is far more important than personality ethic for an effective person. at the center of it is the fact that what we internally are has more effect on people than what we externally say or do. So the 7 habits are not a quick fix program or technique, but it is something that Kavi says we need to internalize and build within ourselves. Paradigm is a way we see the world, universe, and our role in the world. Paradigm isn't what happens to us, but our interpretation of what happens to us. Paradigm shift means to change our interpretation of what happens to us. And Kavi says that we need a paradigm shift to cultivate these habits. And to show and explain paradigm shift, he gives an example. He says that he was once waiting at a subway station, and a man came in with his kids, and the kids were messy and noisy and were creating a ruckus, and the father, this man, wasn't doing anything about it. He was just sitting there. So this irritated Kavi, and he triggered a conversation with the father, trying to eventually arrive at telling him to control his kids. And the father says, "We are just going back home from the hospital. Their mother just died. And they don't know how to deal with it, and I don't know how to deal with it." And immediately Kavi's frustration and irritation changed into empathy, and he says, "What can I do? How can I help?" I have my own experience around this. About 5 years ago, so in my job I have to work with several different functions and several organizations, verticals. And I used to work with one person all the way in Massachusetts, and I'd never met him. We just used to talk on phone. And he will never meet his deliverables. He'll say something will get done and it'll never get done. And I'll keep asking him. And then at some point in time I got frustrated, and I was ready to escalate it to his manager. And I did. And his manager told me that he has 3rd stage cancer and just has a few months left, and that has an impact on his work. And my approach and attitude to Adam changed right away. My way of conversing with him, my way of asking him about deliverables, everything changed. And gradually our conversations became more philosophical. And I got to know Adam better in the last few months of his life. So that is paradigm shift. The book says that principles hold true with time. They do not change with time. Values change with time, but they are usually based on principles. Principles remain constant. Values change. When we internalize principles, they become a habit. A habit is a combination of desire, which is the want to do something, knowledge, which is the what and why, and the skill set on how to do something. So to form a habit, we need to have the desire, the knowledge, and the skill set. So after these initial concepts, the book moves to the 7 habits. The 7 habits are sequential and lead through a continuum of maturity. The continuum of maturity is moving from dependence to independence and from independence to interdependence. Dependency is all about you. You did not do this. You did not do that. You did not come through for me. If I use this you language, then I am a dependent person. Independence is I and self-reliance. I can do this. I will do that. It's my job. I'll take care of it. Independence is better than dependence, and the next level of maturity is interdependence, which is all about we. We can do this. We will do that. Let's do it together. The first three habits are character ethics and take from dependence to independence. And next three are about personality ethic built on top of character ethic and take from independence to interdependence. So once again, I'm trying to stay at a very high level because I'm simply trying to build a framework. For those who are interested to go in the details, you can refer to the book. So let's now spend some time in understanding the 7 habits very quickly, because eventually we'll show that Lord Swaminarayan had these 7 habits. So the first habit is to be proactive. It is a habit of personal vision. It is more than taking initiative. It is about taking responsibility of our own life. So what is responsibility? Responsibility is the ability to choose our response. Our behavior is the product of our decisions based on values rather than a product of conditions based on feelings. So let's take an example. Say, we decide to go for a picnic. We decide on where we are going to go. It's about 2-3 hours of drive. We pack our stuff. The food is all there. We have loaded all our games on our tablets or our phones. We have decided on which music we are going to play along the way. Everything is set. And the weather turns bad. What do? A proactive person will say, that's okay. We are already set for a picnic. Let's go to some other place where weather is good. Or let's, for that matter, have a picnic in our backyard. Now, opposite of proactive is reactive. And a reactive person in this situation will become frustrated and become negative and blame situation and blame people and curse God. A proactive person does not blame people and circumstances for what happens to them. They choose not to be miserable. They choose not to be controlled by the situation. Internal liberty comes from this. This is freedom, the freedom of choice. In any given situation, we can choose our response. Being proactive is being true to our human nature, which is all about acting rather than being acted upon. Being proactive is moving away from determinism. So psychology says that people think that their life is predetermined. That is the theory of determinism. And there are 3 deterministic approaches. One is genetic, which is family-based. I cannot help it if I'm late. It's in my genes. Everyone in my family is always late. It's like that. It's been like that for generations. The second determinism is psychic, which is my parents did this to me. I see a lot of that today. And then the third is environmental, which is my boss did this to me, my spouse did this to me, is the economics, is the national politics, and all that is doing bad things to me. Being proactive is moving from can't, don't, and how frustrating to I have to, I must. And it's about taking control of circumstances than being controlled by them. Be it frustration with traffic, or a customer, or our own child. We are taking responsibility of our own effectiveness and happiness. This is what being proactive means. The second habit is begin with the end in mind. It is a habit of personal leadership, and it deals with direction. It is about always having the image or picture of the end in mind. Kavi says, think of our own funeral 3 years from now. So since Kavi is a Christian, they have funeral, and at funeral, people who know the person say nice things about the person and how many lives the person touched and so on. This speech is called eulogy. So Kavi says, think of our funeral 3 years from now. What will people say about us? Say there are 4 people who give eulogy. 1 family member, 1 friend, 1 co-worker, and 1 person from our religious organization. What would we like them to say about us? Our character, our contributions, and our achievements. We should write it down. This will give us a definition of success that we never knew. We should write in our mind and heart our own value, philosophy, mission statement, and belief. We shouldn't tie ourselves to our history, but to our potential. We should draw heavily upon our inner sense and conscience, distill our thoughts in form of a value or a purpose statement. This purpose statement is written with the end in mind. What will we like people to say about us when we are no more? So that's the second habit. The third habit is first things first. It is about personal management. It deals with speed, coordination, logistics to go in the direction that we set in habit 2. After we decide what the right things to do are, we must focus on efficiency and bottom line. Put first things first. And in order to achieve this, we must manage ourselves. We do not need to manage time. Time is already being managed. 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. What we need to do is manage ourselves. And in order to do that, we must see how the things to do connect to our mission, the mission that we establish in habit 2. And let's take 2 parameters, the important and the urgent. Important means it attaches to habit 2. Urgent is that which is pressing, that which gives urgency. Like a ringing phone. It always wants to be answered, and we can easily get sidetracked by it. Kavi says that most of us manage wrong things in right ways. So he essentially says, think of 4 quadrants. Divide your time with a combination of importance and priority. First quadrant are time that we spend on things that are urgent and important. Second quadrant is things that are not urgent but important. Third quadrant, things that are urgent but not important. And fourth quadrant, things that are not urgent and not important. And now think of one activity in personal and professional life that will improve our lives by leaps and bounds. Which quadrant does it belong to? The one activity that we come up with, Kavi says, invariably belongs to quadrant 2, which is things that are not urgent but important. Kavi says all 7 habits fall in quadrant 2. We all know about the 80-20 rule. 20% key activities are the key to success of the project. And Kavi says that invariably all of these 20% activities fall in quadrant 2, things that are not urgent but important. So Kavi says in order to manage ourselves, we need to say no to quadrant 3 and 4, which are things that are not important. Say no to those. Pay attention to quadrant 2, and eventually by paying attention to quadrant 2, the time we spent in quadrant 1, which is urgent and important, the time we spent in firefighting, most of us do that today, that will diminish. We'll get out of the firefighting mode and we'll have a better prioritization of how we want to approach things in our life. So the first 3 habits, be proactive, begin with the end in mind, and first things first. They form the character ethic and lead from dependence to independence. After achieving independence, an effective person moves to the next maturity level of interdependence. So next 3 habits are about interdependence. The 4th habit is think win-win. It is the abundance mentality. There is enough for everyone. No one needs to lose. Everyone can win. Win-win does not mean being nice. Being nice might end up being a lose-win, where we lose and others win. For win-win, one has to be nice and one has to be courageous. One has to be sensitive and one has to be brave. One has to have self-respect and one has to have respect for others. It is the fruit of habits 1, 2 and 3. Unless one has the character ethic, unless one is independent, one cannot think win-win. In most cases, if we cannot arrive at win-win, Kavi says go for no deal. No deal stops us from being manipulative. It stops us from moving away from 3 habits. It takes us away from hidden agenda. We do not need to fight with each other because there is enough for everyone. That is the abundance mentality, the 4th habit, think win-win. The 5th habit is, in order to communicate, to arrive at a win-win solution, the 5th habit, seek first to understand, then to be understood, comes into picture. We need this to interact and influence. This habit requires a very deep paradigm shift because we by nature, human beings by nature, want to be understood. We do not want to listen. We want others to listen to us. We find it much harder to listen with empathy and depth than to speak. Both parties in any conversation, argument or discussion want to be understood first. So Kavi says, first listen. Make the other person feel understood. Then express. And he beautifully explains this with a father and son example. Once a father came to Kavi and said, I don't think my son understands me. I don't think he gets it. And Kavi asked him, do you understand your son? And father says, I think I do. I've been through teenage years. I know what kind of things a teenager goes through. I can relate to it. I understand him. And then Kavi says, no. Have you had a conversation with your son to understand him? And the father then realizes that he has never really spent good time with his son to understand him, and then he bridges the gap and they start understanding each other. So though we may have passed through different age groups and have had different experiences in life, we cannot say that we are in a position to understand everything about what others are going through. I have another personal example with regards to this habit. About 3-4 years ago, I used to work for an SVP who I really respected. He was very smart and very mature. And I was in a conflict with one of the persons who again was not delivering the things that I thought were necessary for the success of the project. I went to my SVP and I said, I'm having this problem. So instead of talking to me about how to solve the problem, he asked me if I have read 7 Habits of Effective People, and I said, yes, I have, a few years ago. And he says, can you go back and read the 5th habit, and then we'll talk again tomorrow. So the meeting ends. I didn't get a solution, but then because I respected him, I went back home and I got my audio CD out and I listened to it. And then next day I set up a meeting with this person with whom I was having a conflict. And I said, I don't think I understand your problem statement. Why are you not bought into this vision that the whole team is bought into? And then he explained his side and we arrived at a win-win solution. And needless to say, I did not need to have a second meeting with my SVP. So I have a first-hand experience of how this works. By the way, that person with whom I had a conflict later on became a very good friend of mine. So seek first to understand, then to be understood. The sixth habit is synergize. It's about creative cooperation and collaboration, and it results from habit 5. With this habit, two people in dispute work together to come up with a solution better than individual solutions. It is not a compromise. A compromise is when 1 plus 1 is less than 2. Synergy is when 1 plus 1 is greater than 2. Whole is greater than sum of its parts. Habit 6 is about very creative thinking to find new and better ways and solutions. And Kavi actually uses a example very frequently. He says he wanted to go for a vacation by a lakeside with his sons, and his wife wanted to go visit her ailing mother. And Kavi could have told his wife that no way, we are going for a vacation, or gone the route of you always have your way, you win, we'll go see your mother. So rather than doing that, they found a lake near their mother's residence. That way they had a vacation and they were able to see the ailing mother as well. The other example that he uses is window closed and open. One person wants fresh air, the other one person says that the papers fly away because of the wind that comes through. And then both of them work together and come up with a synergetic win-win solution. And this is, how we deal with respect and creativity. Synergy is the crowning achievement of all previous habits. The result is that a person strong on character ethic is able to synergize and come up with a solution better than individual solutions. The seventh habit is a habit of self-renewal, self-maintenance. It's about sharpening the saw. Kavi uses the example here where he says a person is sawing a tree down. You walk up to that person and say that, hey, don't you need to sharpen the saw so that you can cut the tree down faster? And he says, can't you see? I'm busy cutting the tree down. The other example that he uses is, are we ever too busy to fill up gas in our car? Too busy driving that we don't fill up gas? Do we ever say that I was so busy driving that I didn't have time to fill gas in my car? We don't. So for sharpening the saw, Kavi says there are 4 areas: the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional. And he says everyone should spend at least an hour every day on sharpening the saw. For physical, one needs to exercise. For mental, one needs to build a resolve, work on habit 3, manage things. For spiritual, says renew our commitments to our well-developed value system, to our own philosophy, read, meditate, pray, think deeply, whatever works spiritually. And then emotionally, build a loveful relationship with all those that are around us. So in a nutshell, a quick framework for us to work through to show that Supreme Lord Sri Swaminarayan was an effective leader is what we built today. An effective leader helps and makes others more effective. So we'll also establish along the way through the life incidents of Lord Swaminarayan that he was an effective leader. So we took some time today to establish a framework to connect the dots. Using this framework, starting next satsang, we will look at personality of Supreme Lord Sri Swaminarayan in light of contemporary thoughts. Once again, I would like to emphasize that it is not the only way to understand Lord Swaminarayan's personality. And this way does not guarantee an all-encompassing view of Lord Swaminarayan's personality either. I would request the Sabha to look at this as a way rather than the way. It's just one rangoli made from dot matrix, and many more such rangolis can be made. So, from an overall perspective, we did not really talk much about Lord Swaminarayan's personality today. We spent time in building the framework, but starting next satsang, we will talk more about Lord Swaminarayan's personality. With that, let's rest here in the first leg of our journey. We'll continue forward in another 3 to 4 weeks. My humble Charan Sparsh Sir Jai Swaminarayan to all Muktos. Sajanand Swami Maharaj Ni Jai. Bapa Shri Ni Jai. Sadguru Shri Ni Jai. Swaminarayan Bhagwan Ni Jai. Parag bhai, over to you.
Unmute करा दे जय स्वामीनारायण.
हाँ.
स्वामीनारायण. जय स्वामीनारायण जय स्वामीनारायण. કઈ કોઈને કઈ પૂછવું હોય બીજું કે વાત કરી હોય તો નહીં તો પછી આપણે નેક્સ્ટ વીક પાછા મળીશું. It was really good, Punitaben. It was really, really good. It was nice.
જય સ્વામિનારાયણ. હા. થેન્ક યુ.
તમે આજે જે બુક તમે મેન્શન કરી તમે ઈમેલ કરી શકશો અમને?
હા, લિસ્ટ ઈમેલ કરી દઈશું.
આમાં પુનિતાબેન આના પેલા આપણા ઈમેલ પર ઈમેલ કરી દો મને વિશાલને તો પછી તમે બધાને ફોરવર્ડ કરી દઈશું.
ઓકે, ઠીક છે.
or you can reply to that invitation છે ને રિપ્લાય કરીને રિપ્લાય ટુ ઓલ કરશો તો પણ આવી જશે બધા.
હા, હા, મોકલાવી આપીશ. હા. ચાલો, જય સ્વામિનારાયણ. જય સ્વામિનારાયણ.